what are you worried about losing? Often you'll find that fear is based on a stereotype, not the person themselves.
Aspects of different cultures, Muslim culture and other cultures, it's important to remember where they came from. I think that in today's political climate where there's so many different attacks on immigrants, but also just as people who are perceived as different and not truly American.
Child of immigrants and as a person of color navigating American identity. And his work doesn't feel like he's inserting something foreign. Instead, it expands the American narrative by showing that Muslim identity is already part of the American experience. Her influence, extended way beyond athletics because Mattel decided to create a hijab wearing Barbie doll in her likeness. So, listeners, we're going to dive into architecture, sports, literature, and entertainment. You're listening to Wise Women with Daisy Khan, where faith rolls up its sleeves as a force for good, and where women define the future with wisdom and wonder. I'm Daisy Khan, author, speaker, and a Muslim woman who spent her life wrestling with the messy, miraculous collision of faith and real life. And kindly subscribe wherever you get your podcast.
I would say one of the more, I'll put this in quotes, quote unquote, controversial aspects of cultural integration, I think, when it comes to Muslim culture and American culture has been mosques. They're very politicized sometimes. So just to set the groundwork, can you just explain how many mosques are actually in the US and how they've evolved over time? Because, I mean, originally thought before we were researching this that surely mosques would maybe be the one thing that would stay exactly the same, that wouldn't sort of integrate or have any sort of change in American culture over time, but that's not the case, right?
No, not at all. In fact, the numbers vary, but people say that it's anywhere from 2,400 to 2,700 because it changes all the time, right? Because the communities are building mosques, so it's all not static, but I would say it's closer to the 2,700 mosques, and which clearly reflects the growth of the community, but also the community's commitment to maintaining their faith. And because Muslims are still very devout, they do take their religion very seriously. So again, there is a misconception that mosques are taking over. I've seen screenshots of people showing dots all over the United States, like dots of mosques, like 2,700 dots, saying, "Oh my God, look, they're taking over." Well, I want to see the dots of all the churches that we have in this country, right? And so Muslims taking over is a misconception, again rooted in misunderstanding. But what Muslims are doing is just adapting to their need, just like any other faith community has done in the US before us. So, but not all of these 24 to 2,700 mosques are alike. They are very, very diverse. So I know this because I was from New York City. I've seen tiny storefront mosques where only 200 people can fit that serve the community as a place for Friday congregational prayer. Okay. And then there is like a Westbury Mosque, which was the mosque that I attended when I was in Long Island, which is a neighborhood mosque, which serves the broader community. They offer prayer space, they have educational programs, social services, and some youth activities. But what I have not personally seen, but what I've heard of, is now you have a whole new spectrum, a flagship of mega mosques, which have pretty much grown to resemble American mega churches. They include cafes, libraries, Sunday school spaces, gymnasiums, event spaces, and they are a hub for everything for worship, education, cultural, and social life. So that is the exciting part is you can see the Americanization of Islam, even in places of worship.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And it really goes to show how the sort of integration and cultural exchange happens both ways. And there's aspects from multiple cultures that get adopted because they're of utility and because they're just good ideas.
Yeah, and
Um,
you go anywhere in the Muslim world, you will not see that kind of a mosque, that includes youth spaces and this space and that space. It just doesn't exist. Traditional mosques would have a mosque and they would have a school and a library attached to it, right? That was about it. And you didn't have, it was not a community center per se, although the Prophet's mosque, which was the first mosque, was literally like a community center because it was a hub for everything. But what I'm saying is that this is purely needs based, because Muslims need a Sunday school because their kids go to Sunday school, so then they have to create a space for the Sunday school. They want to keep their youth engaged, so they have event space, they have a gymnasium. So yeah.
It's interesting. So let's talk a little bit about representation in media and other cultural outlets, particularly sports. How do you think Muslim American athletes have helped actually counter negative stereotypes about Muslims? Because a lot of them are very famous, regardless of if people know that they are Muslim or not.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think I'd just like to tell my own personal story, because when I came to America, I went to Jericho High School, and I was the only foreigner, only brown girl, only, literally the only outsider in the school, right? And people made fun of me. They made fun of my name. There wasn't like real bullying, but I was just foreigner. I was different, and they didn't know what to do with me. And then I was like, I really wanted to be accepted. And I looked out the window and I saw that there was a hockey team, like field hockey team playing. And I was a very good hockey player where I came from. So I went to the gym teacher and I said, "Can I play hockey?" She said, "Do you know how to hit a stick?" And I said, "Yeah, I knew how to score goals." So Susanna, guess what? On the very first day, I was scoring goal after goal after goal after goal. I took that dismal team to a whole different level. And do you know what happened? I was on the shoulders of people. I was no longer the weird kid. I was like the star who had contributed to something. So
Hmm.
sports is a great way for people to integrate into culture. That's on a personal level. But there are so many athletes that are known for their professional excellence, and I will just mention a few because they have a faith-based component to them. So you have Hakeem Olajuwon, and he is African. He's an immigrant from Africa, and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Both men are celebrated for their achievements, but they're also respected for their deep commitment to their faith. So Hakeem Olajuwon was a Hall of Famer, NBA player. He used to fast during Ramadan, even while playing high stakes games. His ability to perform while abstaining from food and water set a high standard, a gold standard for all Muslim athletes. And he challenged the stereotype that religious observance is a limitation. I remember many people used to say, "Oh, if you are fasting, you're going to die." Certainly, people thought from dehydration, there's no way you can play a game and you're going to get dehydrated. But he proved that you could. And then similarly, you had Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who was an NBA all-time leading scorer for many years. And he also, he is known for his intellectualism, activism, and outspoken embrace of Islam, because he converted in the 70s, and he used his platform after he retired, and still does, to speak against racial injustice and to educate the public about Islam. And so he has helped humanize and normalize Muslim identity in American public life because he's very vocal and outspoken. And then there's another important figure who kind of came onto the scene only recently, and she's a woman, Ibtihaj Muhammad. She's a fencer who became the first American woman to compete in the Olympics wearing a hijab. So this was a big deal because she actually won the bronze medal, and she shattered the stereotype about Muslim women's visibility and strength, because here she was an athlete, right? You don't identify women with that. And her influence, extended way beyond athletics, because Mattel decided to create a hijab wearing Barbie doll in her likeness. So this moment, I think, was a cultural shift towards the normalization of Muslims in mainstream America. Because can you imagine little Muslim girls seeing a Barbie doll, with a hijab? And to me, that was, and she is considered a model by many Muslims, even overseas.
That's amazing. And yeah, your personal story and what you're just talking about with the Barbie definitely makes me think about the fact that sports are also so important because they're such an outlet for children in schools. That is such a way that people connect with their peers. I did dance for many years, and the girls that I ended up doing dance with for, elementary school through high school, I ended up being so close with. So it's definitely a community. I think that another major space that a lot of Muslims are in America, Muslim Americans, is definitely pop culture and entertainment. There's
Yeah.
so many different examples. The ones that definitely come to my mind first are people like Hasan Minhaj, Rami Youssef, and Mo Amer, who all participate in comedy, acting, and storytelling. So, are these Muslim Americans inserting elements of Muslim identity into mainstream American culture, or is it some sort of unique mix of all of that, depending on the person?
Yeah, you're right. The last thing is what you said is correct. It's a combination of all those things, right? If you take Hassan Minhaj, in his comedy, he is clearly rooted in the American format of stand-up comedy and storytelling, which is very familiar to U.S. audiences. But he also weaves in his experience as a Muslim, as a child of immigrants, and as a person of color navigating American identity. And his work doesn't feel like he's inserting something foreign. Instead, it expands the American narrative by showing that Muslim identity is already part of the American experience. So then you have Rami Youssef, whose show Rami on Hulu explores the inner conflict of a practicing Muslim, right? In a modern American setting. I mean, he dropped some jaws with some of the stuff that he showed in his, like, Muslims couldn't deal with what he was showing because it was inner stuff, inner conflicts. And it doesn't preach religion, but it also doesn't hide it, right? He was doing something very uniquely American, telling a deeply personal, faith infused story through the medium of TV comedy. And then you have Muammar, a Palestinian American comedian who has become an overnight sensation for his Netflix series Mo, which is actually loosely based on his own life story as a refugee growing up in Houston, Texas. And in the show, he's navigating legal status, trying to hold down multiple jobs, honoring his mother's expectation, and all this time trying to stay connected to his faith. And he does this with humor and complexity. And he does not only include his Muslim and Palestinian identity, he centers everything around it. And he does it in a funny and a real way, which makes it very relatable to both Muslim and non-Muslim viewers. And then you didn't mention this, but because I have to bring in women, so Disney actually created Miss Marvel, right? And Miss Marvel was directed by a Muslim woman, Sharmeen Obaid Chinoy. She's an Oscar winner. And here we see a young Pakistani girl uh, as a superhero. and and her character is brought to life through storytelling, really authentic storytelling. This was one of the successes of Miss Marvel because it was really authentic. And here you don't see a Muslim from an outsider looking in. They're actually showing you that she's part of an American cultural life and telling her own story on her own terms. Miss Marvel was enjoyed by so many people that are not Muslim, and they said they felt that first of all, they enjoyed another culture, but they also felt that the conversations between the parent and the child were similar conversation that people were having with their own children.
Yeah, that's great. You're an advocate for women and for gender equality. I'm curious what you think the biggest contribution of Muslim women in the US is, especially in literature and the fine arts. Is there necessarily one standout achievement that you can choose, or is it an impact across multiple areas that you would point to?
Yeah, well, I think it is multiple areas because Muslim women are leading in all sorts of ways in literature, fine arts, space exploration, and a lot of social change work, that impacts society, right? And so I think they're challenging a lot of stereotypes that way. And in literature, you have authors like S.A. Chakraborty, who has brought Islamic history and fantasy into mainstream publishing with her acclaimed Dava Bed trilogy. And then you had Azar Nafisi, whose ultimate bestseller, Reading Lolita in Tehran, brought American readers into the lived experience of an Iranian woman. Then you have Shazia Sikandar, who received a MacArthur Genius Award for her multimedia. She explores themes of migration, faith, and femininity, and she is a very well-known artist who's exhibited in elite art institutions, and she was even commissioned by New York City to create a sculpture, an outdoor sculpture. Then we have Anushi Ansari, the first Muslim woman in space, who's reached beyond the limits of what one could possibly even imagine. So, I can't point to just one contribution, but I can tell you that we see a broad presence of Muslim women everywhere, shaping culture, whether it's through creativity. There are so many filmmakers. There's not enough time in this podcast to even, mention them all. But yeah, they are really innovating, they are creating and serving.
Yeah, that's definitely true. So you listed a lot of women who have done really great things, but one person you did not mention is yourself, who is obviously a very accomplished Muslim woman who has many achievements. I did want to talk about, though, one contribution that you tried to make that ended up being a little bit more complicated, maybe, than you originally thought it would be. And this is about how in 2010, you tried to build a cultural center in New York City, which planned to serve both Muslims and non-Muslims. So there was definitely a lot of discourse around this at the time, but hearing from you, since this was your idea, can you tell us just what was behind this idea, why it didn't go forward, and looking back on it so many years later, what your thoughts on it are, and if you have any regrets, or if you think that you did everything that you could and it was really just the political climate around you that became an issue.
Yeah. So, in order to answer this question, we have to kind of go back to the story of religion in America, which is how do religions evolve in America, right? And so, every faith has been shaped by the American experience. And in turn, that religion then shapes America itself, right? We've seen that repeatedly with all religions. So, they do this by what they call interlocutor institutions, like the YMCA and the JCC come to mind because those are the two big religions, Judaism and Christianity, that then serve the community, and they also then reach out to the wider public. So initially, you had the places of worship, which are the synagogues and the churches, and then you had these other institutions that were created for the broader public as well. So as an architectural designer, and I was watching my community grow, and as a bridge builder, I knew that Muslims had to also weave themselves into the American fabric, and we needed to do the same. So my vision wasn't just to create the mosque, because there were enough mosques in New York City at that time. It was to create this 21st century vibrant cultural center that very much looked and felt like the JCC and the YMCA, with a Muslim flavor and Muslim cultural expression. So imagine a space where anyone, Muslim or not, could enter through the portals of culture. We spoke about how many different, means there are to culture, right? We could see a film in a theater. You could have a book reading in the library. You could work out in the gym. And yeah, you could worship in a mosque, in the prayer space, and you could even learn about our faith. But unfortunately, our opponents didn't see this as a bridge. They saw this as a monument, a threat to their fear based narrative. And you see, Susanna, you can't portray somebody as alien when they're serving you coffee, teaching you how to cook, and putting in an art exhibit that enriches your life. So they were trying to stop us, and they did, with legal hurdles, first with legal hurdles, zoning battles, and literally outright media hysteria. And as I've complained repeatedly, that media shapes the narrative, and then those narratives then get shape the perception, and then people form a stereotype based on their perception. And so that's what happened, and that's why we couldn't move forward. But my biggest regret isn't the personal defeat. It's that they successfully prevented an entire generation of Muslims from integrating into the American landscape. And They didn't just block a building, they delayed. And I say delayed because it is going to happen. Another group is going to make it happen. They delayed the inevitable American expression of Islam by decades. They set us back by decades. And that's
Yeah.
my greatest regret.
Yeah, that's really unfortunate, but I do like that you have that tinge of hope there that it will happen. It's inevitable whether they want it or not because it's what the community wants. So I hope that that does happen. So continuing to talk about you, obviously that was a more complicated journey. But you obviously have a lot of other things as well to be proud of and a lot of other achievements. So I'm wondering, when you look back on your career so far, what has been your biggest achievement? Can you choose just one?
Yeah, so I'm not going to speak about how I see it. I'm going to speak about what people tell me, right? People tell me that when they think of me, they think of me as being a connector, how many people I've connected. When they think of me, they think of me as uniter in chief. I try to unite people. And when they think of me, they think of me as trying to solve a problem. So I'm a problem solver, a uniter, and a connector. And I've tried to do this through all kinds of means. I've tried to do this through the arts, where whether it's creating theatrical productions, whether it's to create a dialogue between people, but also I had to learn a new skill, which was to write. And so I wrote many books. So I could debunk the many myths and misunderstandings about Islam and Muslims. So I wrote the book called Wise Up to debunk how extremists were weaponizing my religion. I wrote 30 Rights of Muslim Women so I could debunk that Muslim women have full agency. I wrote Born with Wings so I could show people how a Muslim woman can be completely modern and be faith-based and to show people what a Muslim woman's spiritual journey looks like. So, and for this today, with this podcast that I'm doing, I'm hoping that I can reach even more people than before with this important work. So I'm not proud of just a single accomplishment, but what I can tell you, what I'm really going to be proud of, is I have no retirement plan, Susanna.
Perfect. I'm glad to hear that. That's how it should be.
I can't imagine stepping away from giving back. I see the charge, I see the charge, I see the responsibility, and I don't take it lightly. That sense of purpose is what keeps me energized and motivated every single day, despite the many, many challenges, because I want people to follow that example and say, oh, she's so old and she's still doing this. Yeah, yeah. Age is not a barrier to anything.
Well, I don't think that you're so old.
Well,
Um,
I'm older than you. I'm just saying when people look at me and they go, she's still doing
mhm.
that.
No, I think that's great. I think that there's so much cynicism today, especially among young people who are just entering the world of politics and activism and bridge building and all of that kind of thing. It's very easy to sort of just want to throw in the towel and give up. So it's great to have people who have really put in the work, who are ready to continue doing that and leading young people who want to do that.
Yeah.
So, one thing we talked about so much during my internship was the negative portrayal of Islam and Muslims by the press, whether that's in movies or in, actual news outlets. So, based on what we've talked about today, where we've talked about really great elements of cultural integration, do you think, does that make you feel hopeful about the future of Muslim representation and Muslim Americans, their experience?
Yeah. I think the examples that I've shared with you before do make me very hopeful, you know. And what makes me hopeful for is that for the size of the community, which is like 1% of the American population, I think Muslims are doing a lot, their fair share in contributing to this country. So you just have to look just on mainstream media. You have people like Fareed Zakaria. I mean, he has one of the best shows on CNN, GPS, right? You have Ali Velshi on MSNBC. You have Amna Nawaz on PBS. They're at the highest, they're at the top of their game in national media. You have screenwriters telling very nuanced stories, and you have elected officials and nonprofit leaders tackling societal issues. So I think we're not just reacting to misrepresentation, I think we're actively reshaping it. And that's what gives me the hope is that there are so many unsung heroes. The ones that I pointed out are public figures, right? You have educators, you have inventors, you have doctors, organizers, small business owners quietly doing their part. Honestly, if it wasn't for their efforts, we'd be in a much worse place. And the truth is, despite all these odds that are stacked against that, I think we've responded with resilience and grace. And so I'm very hopeful that we're shaping how we're not just seen. To me, that that's powerful.
I think it's great that what you're saying, that there is really just this proactive approach to it. It's not all about combating what the press or the media or, Hollywood or whatever is putting out there. It's really just about continuing to be your authentic self and share your identity in the way that feels right for you, and just continuing to do that activism. And I think that hopefully, the truth, which is that those are all good things, will actually prevail.
Yeah, yeah. Our opponents think that we are like thorns. I tell them, no, we're like rose bushes. The only thing is, we're not like in a rose garden. We're like blooming in all different directions.
That's wonderful. Great. Well, I think that's the end of my questions.
Yeah. So I think that we have reached the end, right, Susanna? We've covered everything. Today, you're being my literally my co-host, and so I want to ask you a question. From all this experience, from the internship and from doing the research for this particular podcast, what are your key takeaways? What are you taking away from all this?
Definitely a lot. It was a really educational experience, the whole thing, not just the podcast, but the internship as well. I feel like there was stuff that I already knew, but I feel like I also learned a lot. And it was really interesting to see what your efforts actually look like day to day, to be building these bridges, making these connections, responding to current events. It was really interesting to see what that sort of activism and education actually, looks like in practice. I think our conversation today really made me have one takeaway, which was that it's really important that when we're enjoying all these different foods and aspects of different cultures, Muslim culture and other cultures, it's important to remember where they came from. I think that in today's political climate, where there's so many different attacks on immigrants, but also just as people who are perceived as different and not truly American, because that's one of the tropes that we talked about. um, I think that people are really comfortable in taking advantage of what other cultures have given them, whether that's food or clothes or people, athletes, without actually recognizing the people who are behind them. So I think that definitely, even though I'm finishing up my internship, that's definitely something that I'm going to try to work on the day to day, is when I'm enjoying, halal guys, really thinking about that and really sharing that with other people. Did you know that Chobani was made by someone who is Muslim who came to America, and this and that. So I think that, yeah, that was definitely one of my big takeaways, that it's really important to remember the people that are behind these different practices, and that you don't have to be a professional activist or advocate or educator or something to remind the people around you where these things came from and who the people are behind them and what different cultures are contributing to the US. You can just do that on your own every single day.
Yeah. Oh, that's so beautiful. Thank you so much, Susanna, for sharing that. And you have been a stellar intern, and I wish you the best in your life and all your ventures. And I hope that what you've learned here today, you will take that into the work. I hope that you somehow get involved in public service, because you're natural to me, it feels. And and I know that it's been a very rich experience for me to have you, and I hope it's been the same for you.
Yes, absolutely. And such an interesting time to be doing it too. I feel like there's just endless real life examples of everything we've been talking about. So
Yeah,
really
yeah.
interesting.
So thank you, Susanna. So, dear listeners, you could see that America is not a static or a frozen culture. It grows stronger by embracing new cultural traits through adoption, not imposition. And this so-called encroachment narrative falls apart when you look at the facts. The fact is, Muslim Americans are not outsiders. They start small businesses at rates that outpace the national average. I'm sure you didn't know that. They're creating jobs, revitalizing Main Street, and investing in your community. What could be more American than that? So, here are a few things that each and every one of us can do. As we mentioned earlier, integration requires contact. Do make a new connection. This could be as simple as introducing yourself to a Muslim neighbor you haven't spoken to, or attending an interfaith open house, or even going to a local mosque. And because real relationships are the ultimate antidote to fear. And get curious. The next time you hear someone express the fear of encroachment, ask a gentle question. What are you worried about? Losing. Often you'll find that fear is based on a stereotype, not the person themselves. So if you want to go deeper, then check out the list of all the incredible filmmakers, authors, historians, and I think you will see that this vibrant culture, through its own lens, not just through the headlines. So I wish you much success. Until the next episode, I am Daisy Khan, your host. Stay blessed. Thank you for joining me on Wise Women. If something stirred in you today, don't let it stop here. Share this episode with someone who needs it. Reflect on what resonated for you, and definitely plant one seed of change, however small. Remember, you do matter, and your actions have a ripple effect. But none of us can rise alone. To explore more resources and ways to get involved, do visit my website, daisycon.com. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave a review, because every click is your way of amplifying this message to others. Wisdom isn't just heard, my friends, it's lived. So let's live it. Until next time, stay wise and stay rooted.